Hi everyone, my name is Keegan White. I'm one of the developers that works on iNethi, and today I'm going to show you how to set up an iNethi server in your house. So this setup will use an Intel i5 NUC. The process would be the same if you're setting it up on a virtual machine. So today I'm going to show you how to set it up, how to go about flashing the device, how to go about setting up the iNethi environment, and I'm going to do it without a firewall to do your DNS resolving and just do that manually on your machine. So today this setup will show you how to do that, which would be the same steps for a virtual machine. So this would be not for a production environment, but more a test environment at your house. So follow along. All you'll need is either a virtual machine that you'll boot up with Ubuntu 20 or a mini PC like an Intel NUC. So for my personally, I'm going to be using the NUC. So the first step will be to create a bootable USB. So for something like this, you can use, I'm on Mac, so Berliner Etcher. On Windows, I believe you can use Rufus. So some sort of program like that. So I'm going to take you through those steps now. So the first step, as I said, is to create your bootable USB. You simply insert your USB. You'll clone, so I'm going to flash from a file because I've downloaded it. You can go through where you've downloaded it. So I'm doing the live server 20.04 version. You choose that, you select your target, which here will be this flash drive, and then once you select that, you flash it. I've already done that process. It can take a little bit, not too long, depending on the USB you're using and what kind of, if you have an SSD, those sort of things. So once that's done, the next step will be boot up your NUC. So I'll take you through that now. So as you can see, I already have a fully functional iNethi environment running. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to flash this device and show you the setup processes. So here's the NUC. The first step will just be to power it down. So you can see it's turning off there. And then what we're going to do is boot this machine from the hard drive and install Ubuntu again. So depending on the NUC you're using or the mini PC, for this machine, I've already set it up so that it can boot from a USB. But if you follow these steps with your NUC and it doesn't boot from the USB and it doesn't show up as an option to do that, you may have to edit some configuration, which I'll show you how to do as well. Okay, so now I put the USB in, I have a mouse and keyboard plugged in, I have it set up to the monitor. So you're going to turn it on, and then once it starts booting, just wait for it to turn on. You can hold, so I'm pressing F2. Okay, and this will bring up a kind of graphical user interface where you can set it up to boot from a USB and to enable that. So this kind of, it depends on what NUC you're actually using, but you normally go into the advanced options and you can select the boot option, and you can allow it to boot from, so go into your boot configuration and enable USB booting devices. And then what I'm going to do, you can also enable it to boot from USB devices first. So this has all been enabled on this machine, so it will work. Okay, I've already set up all these changes, so I don't need to save it. And then I'm going to hold F10 while it boots up again. So F10 will allow you to select which device you want to boot from. So I'm just gonna, there we go, pressing F10, and you'll get this here. So now you can see there's various bootable devices. So I already have Ubuntu installed, but I'm gonna do a fresh install from this USB. If you just press enter, you'll have your options here. So I'm gonna install Ubuntu server. And then this may take a while depending on your internet speed when you want to do the updates and all the things like that. So I've already got it plugged in via Ethernet. So over here, it will come, and then this process will check the integrity of the software that you're going to install. So that can take a little while. There, as it says there. So once this process is done, I'll show you the next steps. Okay, so the integrity and everything was checked, it was all fine. So now you go through the basic Ubuntu OS setup. So it's just choosing your language, your keyboard, all that kind of stuff. So this isn't important. So I'll come, when we resume, I will start setting up the actual environment. The OS is now installed, and I'm going to go through the installation process for the actual iNethi environment. So instead of doing it and typing everything on the actual device, I'm going to SSH into it now from my Mac terminal. So just going to follow this process, type in the password. Okay, and now we can see that I'm in the device. So you can just follow along the installation steps for installing Docker Engine and Docker Compose onto your PC. So this is really just copying and pasting these commands. So you'll go through this whole process, and then you'll run the Docker hello world container, make sure everything is running. You will then want to go to post installation steps for Linux, and you want to make sure that Docker can run without sudo. And then once that's done, you'll install Docker Compose. And in order for this to work on the Nook and things, you're going to have to restart once you've followed this step here. So then, as I said, install Docker Compose, and then we'll get started with the setting up of the iNethi environment. So I'm not going to go through this because it's quite literally just following these steps. It's a really simple process. I have Docker and Docker Compose installed now, and I'm going to take you through the steps for setting up the actual iNethi environment. So we normally work in the mount folder. So I just make a code directory, and then I'm going to go to the iNethi master builder repo. I'm going to copy this URL, and then I'm going to move into the mount code folder. Okay, then I'm going to clone this repo. So I'm going to clone everything there, and then I'm going to move into the actual repo. Okay, so now I'll just check all the contents are there, and we're going to be working with this traffic build all script. So when you look at the README in the actual repo, this is the kind of describes the whole process here, but essentially the important thing is to install Docker and all that kind of stuff, and then to check your IP address. Okay, so you can use IPA on a fresh installation. Okay, and you can see for my machine, it's 192.168.0.134. So I'm just going to copy that. So that is the IP address of this machine, and that's going to be important for the next step. So we're going to want to edit our DNS.conf file in the master builder directory before we run the build all script. So I use Nano, you can use any text editor. We're going to go back here, and we're going to go to traffic and DNS mask, and then we're going to go to the DNS mask folder, and we're going to edit the DNS.conf file. This will come up when you see 127.0.0.1. You want to remove that, and you just want to replace it with the IP address of your machine. Then you want to save all these changes that you've just, well, save this one change you've just made. Okay, and that's that. Exit. Now we're still in this main directory. So all we're going to do is, as it says in the README, you're going to add that, and then you're going to, pretty much all you have to do is run this command here. So I'm going to run that now, and I'll talk through what's happening. Okay, so now you're going to get this interactive menu. This could change by the time you watch this video. Maybe there's more services that have been added or converted. For now, all I'm going to do is set up the splash page. So the Nook will be hosting a website essentially. Okay, that's all I want. And then what's going to happen is it's going to pull the image for a DNS mask. It's going to try build that Docker image and fail because it's going to try use port 53, which already has the Ubuntu machine already has pre-configured DNS settings mounted to that, so it's going to fail. The build script is then going to disable those pre-existing mounts and then rebuild the Docker image. So it's important that the Docker image was downloaded beforehand, because when you disable your DNS, there won't be any way to resolve like from the Docker compose file, and it won't be able to contact the internet essentially and pull the image. So we already have the image. So once it fails, disable the DNS, rebuild the image because we already have everything downloaded. You'll now have an active DNS and the rest of the system will carry on building. So this, depending on your internet speed, may take a while, may be really quick, kind of just depends. Okay, so you see now it's pulling these images and then it's going to fail once it tries to build them. So their expected failure, there it's going to disable things and build the splash screen. And then you can see now it's resolving and pulling the Nginx image, so you know you have an active and working DNS mask container that everything's being directed through. So again, depending on your internet speed, this will vary in the speed. Okay, so now we can check that everything's running by running docker ps-a. Okay, and we can see, I'm just gonna make this a bit bigger. We can see here, so there was the hello world image that I used to test everything was working, but now you can see our Trafic and Nginx DNS mask is all running. All the ports are correctly bound to whichever image we want them to be bound to. And essentially this now means that our Nook over there is currently hosting our web page. So if you don't have something like a Netgate pfence router or something like that to set up your home network to resolve requests for the services running on the iNethi Nook, I'll show you a way that you can do it manually to set up a nice test environment in your house. So when we resume, I'll show you that. Okay, so now I'm back on my host machine. You can see this was the terminal window I SSH'd in, so I've opened a new one, and I'm going to edit my hosts file, and I'm going to go and add in, so this is the IP address my network's given the Nook. In the case that this was running a virtual machine, you would just find the IP address of the virtual machine and put this in here, and then you add the URL of the service that is running. So by default, all these services are in the environment variables stored within the directories of the repo you would have cloned. So you can edit all of those, but just make sure that you edit all of them and edit your Trafic Docker Compose to use the right URL. So now every time I request this URL here, it's going to send that request to the Nook. So if I go to, I open a browser window and I go to splash .inethi-home.net, there we see the splash page, which is running on my Nook. So in the case it was a virtual machine, it would also just redirect to the virtual machine. And that's pretty much the whole installations, all the installation steps and environment setup for a little iNethi test server in your house. As I said, you can, if you have a firewall in your house, so something like a pfSense router, you can go into the DNS resolve settings there and set it to automatically resolve anything with iNethi, home.net, to the NUC or virtual machine, whatever you're running. So I hope you followed along and that was easy enough. Please let us know if you have any questions. Go look through our repo, create some pull requests if you have any services that you think are cool and want to add, or contact us directly. Thanks so much.